Hey, so where we left off in the last video was we created a breakpoints file, and we just made a few mixins and a few functions that help us create breakpoints. And using these breakpoints, using this breakpoint mixin that we created, we can actually output the content in the correct breakpoint, and we can also assign the breakpoint suffix. So what that's allowing us to do is allow, or we can use bg dash the color and then at the size to change the color based on the viewport size. So as you can see, if I just collapse down my window a little bit, you can see the colors are changing. So that was a really great first start, and what it's done is it's exposed something to us. So what we can do is we can actually copy this content above into its own mixin and reuse it for any kind of utility class that we want to create in the future. So let's just take that out, and we're going to go back into our breakpoints file and create a new mixin. Let's say at mixin, and this time we're going to call it breakpoint loop. And the breakpoint loop doesn't take in any arguments. It's just going to render out the content of this loop. So what that means now is that anytime we want to loop over breakpoints and set everything up, we can just simply say at include breakpoint loop, and then inside of that mixin, we can just do our for loop over what we want to actually create. Looks like we have an error. I think I just missed something. So what are we missing? We're missing include undefined mixin breakpoint dash loop. Did I spell it wrong? Breakpoint loop. There we go. I think I just had a typo. Alright, so now what we can do is we can just use that include breakpoint loop and loop over the map that we want to create our selectors for. And then we have everything available to us. We have that breakpoint suffix depending on what the current breakpoint is. So we can use that now to really easily create all kinds of different classes. So what we're going to do in this video is look at creating our paddings and margin classes. So I'm just going to close this colors window. I don't need that anymore. I don't think we need to reference this breakpoints anymore. All we need from this whole file in the future is just this breakpoint loop. So we can close that. What I've done here is I've imported a new file called functions, which is just an empty file at the moment, and I've imported another file called spacing. So spacing is where we're going to do our margin and our padding utility classes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set up a list. So I'm going to use a list this time instead of a map, because all we need out of this is actually just numbers. We're going to use the numbers in the list to get the calculation. So let's just create a variable called spacing. And all I'm going to do is make a list of numbers. So this list, I just have numbers from 1 through to 20. So basically what this is going to let us do is it's going to let us create some classes like, let's just say P for padding dash 1, or it could be M for margin, and then T for top dash 4. And what that's going to equal number is going to be an increment of 0.25 rem. So 1 is going to be 0.25 and 4 is going to be 1 rem. But for margin, we're also going to need to set a property of auto. So we can't exactly loop these numbers right now and then multiply it by 0.25 rem to get the actual value with auto in the list. So we're probably going to need to write a function that checks that the number is actually a number before it tries to do that multiplication. So we'll leave auto in there. Now let's just jump into our spacings.css file. Now we know now that we've set up the world so we can just create our breakpoints nice and easily. So all I can do is just say @include breakpoint-loop and then render out any of the content inside here. And that's going to give us access to that breakpoint suffix variable that we can attach on to any one of our selectors. So let's just iterate over that spacings loop that we created. So we're just going to say each, and we're going to say for each, let's call it, maybe we can call it size. So for each size in spacing, then we want to do something. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check if the size is actually a number. So to get started, let's just write a function up the top, which is going to return if it's a number or not. So let's just say is number. Of course, we've got to call that a function. So is number is going to take in a value, and it's going to return if, well, I don't even think we need to check that. We can just return type of. So we can return type of value is equal to number. And I think that'll do it. So that'll just return true or false if the value that we pass to this function is in fact a number. So why don't we go here and set up the width property. So let's just set it to null as a local variable. And what we're going to do is we're just going to check what that width actually is. So we can say here, let's just say if is number. So we say if is number the current size, then what do we want to do? So if it is a number, then we want to set width to the number. So let's just say width equals width. And we said we wanted to multiply this by a factor of 2.5 rem. So that's good. So we actually want to make that size. So we're multiplying size by 0.25 rem. We're setting it into that width variable. And let's just say else. So if it's not a number, then we're just going to say the width is just going to be the size. So in this case, it's just going to be, if it's auto, then we're just going to set the width to auto. Cool. All right, so let's go through and create our paddings. So we can do a loop again. Oh, we're actually already inside the loop, so we don't need to do a loop. But what we want to do is we want to do each side. So we have a top, we have a bottom, we have a left, and we have a right. So these are all the sides that are going to require padding or are going to require margin. So we'll just focus on top first before we do the rest. So in top, we want to say, well, if this person wants padding all around, then that means they want top padding as well. So we can say if p dash the size. Then we want to say padding top is going to be width. Cool. I'm not sure if I need to escape this. Let's just make sure that we do. We also need to say, well, if the person is specifically asking for padding top by using PT, then we also want to give them padding top. And if they're saying they want padding on the y-axis with py-size, do we want to give them padding top too? Alright, so I think that should work. So if we just save that and compile, well, it looks like we have an error. What's the error? Spacing. Size and spacing is an undefined variable. Well, we have spacing. Did I not save it before? Just recompile. Oh, it looks like we have the same issue. Okay, so here how we have size times 2.5 rem. It's an undefined operation. So here it looks like it's trying to multiply that order. So let's see what's happening. So we're saying if number size if is number size, then we're multiplying that. So if it's auto, it's not a size, so I'm not sure why it's actually getting that far. Let's just get rid of auto for a second and just see if we can actually build it. Alright, so it looks like that is building. We just have an issue with our logic here. So what's going on? If is number size. Well, that should be returning return type of value equals a number. So that should just be returning Boolean. So I'm not sure why that's not working. Let's take a bit of a look. Oh, let's see what I've done here. I've just need to pass that to type of. Yeah, so I'm passing the value to that function and it's giving me back what it is, and then I'm just checking if it is actually coming back as being number. Alright, so that should build fine now. And if I go back to my variables and I add auto back in, right, then it's how we expected. So just a typo there. Alright, so now we're getting our paddings for our top. That's great. But we can also do what we've done with the background colors and the text colors, where we've actually just done a loop inside the loop. So that way, instead of just calling paddings here and then doing another loop for margin, just do it all in the same loop. So let's just say, like we've done before, so let's just say each, let's call it prop, and abbreviation, in our new list that we create. So the prop that we're going to be doing first is padding, abbreviation is just P, and the second prop we want to loop is margin, and we're going to give that an abbreviation of M. Cool, so that means for each one of those we can just loop it now. Right, and we can just say, well, we can change P to just be the actual abbreviation. We can change padding to be the actual property that we want to be styling. Great, okay. So if we give that a save, we should be. So it looks like we have our P order and an M order. Now we know that padding can't be order, right? So we need to avoid that somehow. See what we can do. Let's go back into our spacing and see what we can do here. Something's gone wrong. So I think what we need to do is we just need to say if, so make another if inside this else, and we're just going to say if the I see what I've done. So we can just put this inside this each loop actually. We can put that width in here too, and I think this should sort us out. If it doesn't, what we can do is just add another conditional inside this else. Let's see if that fixes it for us. So now we have P order and M order. Okay, so we're still getting that padding top order, which is something we don't want. So let's just go in here and say if, so we want to say if the current prop we want to say if the current prop is margin, so let's just tidy it up. So if the current prop equals margin, then what do we want to do? Well, in that case, we want to set the width to value. And if it's not, then we want to set that width to null. And if it's a null value, then it's just not going to output that at all. Okay, so if we save that and compile, check out app CSS now, you can see that we don't have that padding auto anymore, which is perfect, exactly what we want. So all we need to do now is just go through and fill out the rest of these. So I can just copy this down below bottom, and I can just change top to bottom, and I can change this T to B. Then for left, I can just change T for L, Y to X, and then left. And I can do the same just below for right. I can just change left to right and L to R. Just clean up some of these extra spaces. Right. So now what we have is we're using that breakpoint loop that we've created. We're looping over all of our spacings, and then we're looping over the list of padding and margin. We're just creating the width depending on if it's a number or not. And then we're setting the property if it's a margin. So if the margin is getting back a non-numeric value, then we're just setting it because we want to be able to use that value, which in this case is just order. And then after we set up the width, we're just going through each of the expected classes that we want to use and just writing out those class selectors and then the properties that we want to be targeting. So that's done. So let's just jump into our welcome file, which we're looking at here in the browser. Now I can just start adding some paddings. So let's say the heading, let's just give it padding all around of 20. Perfect. It looks like for some reason it hasn't got padding bottom. I wonder why that is. Let's go back into spacing. I made a mistake here somewhere. Oh, there we go. I just didn't save it after I added those new properties in. Cool, so we have padding 20. Let's give it a margin bottom of, I don't know, 8. So it's nice and spaced out. Let's give the BG yellow block a padding of 10. Cool. And let's give this one a margin bottom of 20. And then finally, let's just go crazy on this one and say padding top of 20, padding bottom of 3, and let's just say padding on the X of 8. Great. And let's try that MX property. Let's just say margin on either side is going to be 10. Cool. It looks like that's all working. So now that we have refactored out this breakpoint loop, it should be pretty easy from here on out just to go through and add in all of the rest of our utility classes that we need to have a CSS utility framework.